I welcome Margit and Analivia on stage. We go back now a few decades in art history to the beginnings of digital art, to one of the greatest pioneers who was very influential in South America, Waldemar Cordeiro. And it's a great pleasure to have Analivia Cordeiro, the daughter of the artist, who is herself one of the most influential artists, especially in cybernetic choreography, and Margit Rosen, who comes from ZKM, and she is one of the biggest authorities on this field, I would say. The discussion will be followed by a documentary film of Waldemar Cordeiro, and I would welcome you to stay and see that movie. It's really worth it. So the stage is yours. Thank you very much that you came.
Thank you, Georg. So I'm delighted here to talk with Analivia Cordeiro about the artist Waldemar Cordeiro, who would have turned 100 years this year. And he was one of the key personalities of concrete art in Brazil, but also a pioneer of computer art. But he was also Analivia's father, and I know that you adore this image, so this is why I show it. That's the proof. And during the pandemic, Analivia made this documentary, Waldemar Cordeiro, Fantasia Exata, in which numerous witnesses, contemporaries, and also art historians and scientists speak about your father. And what I can say, we are all deeply indebted to you, because it is not self-evident for you being an artist with your own career that you spend so much time and dedication to your father's legacy. So that's not also only kept, but also made visible. So thank you very much for that. And I just want to say a few words of Analivia. She was born in Sao Paulo, and she is a dancer, a choreographer, but also an architect, which most people do not know. So you studied dance with Laban's method in Brazil, but also in New York with Merce Cunningham, amongst other. And you graduated in architecture, but you also have a PhD at communication and semiotics. So, as I'm not sure if everyone is familiar with the work of Waldemar Cordeiro, because what we realize at art fairs, some know him as a concrete artist and the others know him as a pioneer of computer art, but hardly anybody knows both. But so just a very brief overview. He was born in Rome in 1925 as a son of an Italian mother and a Brazilian father. And after the war, he went to Brazil and he moved there permanently in 1948. And he first worked as an art critique and also illustrator, but he already then started to paint, and soon he became that key figure in concrete art and a landscape architect, and finally also a pioneer of digital art in Brazil. And he died in 1973, aged just 48, which was really much too early. So my first question to you, what do we need to know about the childhood and youth in Rome? In what kind of family did he grow up? What was his interest? And I need to remind you that that was Rome under Benito Mussolini, who had proclaimed dictatorship in 1925.
Well, this question is very important because, first of all, I want to thank Georg. And this question is very important because he was educated in art at Accademia delle Belle Arti. That is a traditional place where they teach Leonardo da Vinci's Renaissance classical painting. And the contact he had with Leonardo da Vinci, that's not only an artist, but it's a scientist too, brought him the idea of the art inside the world, not art as in the art world, but in the science, in the society, in the history, and in the human behavior. And this is what gave him the basis to go to a country like Brazil, where there was nothing, even one art school, and to have the the basis to develop his work there. And in his life, he always was connected to Europe. Even his personal friends were from here. And he had a strong accent. He was an Italian in Brazil. You hear, buongiorno. So he was always Italian. But he had the chance to have a country where there was nothing. He could do whatever he wanted, because in Europe he would have to answer all the tradition and everything. So he would never be able to do so much as he did, because Brazil, he had the opportunity to do everything. And they would listen to him. And what I think is very, he could understand quickly, is that he had to have the support of the society. So he was very well placed. He knew people, connected, and he was very welcome in traditional art world, and he is still now. And when he began digital, he really how to say in English, he really became one member of digital art that had no community, but had already a few artists researching. He really said, no, you from traditional have to pay attention to the digital. And he wrote about this. So I think when I brought him here and I said, Georgi, let's talk about him 100 years, it's because he would do the same if he was alive, you know.
I may just jump a little bit back with a small question. Why did he leave Italy for Brazil?
Why did he want to live in Brazil?
Why did he go from, he could have stayed in Italy. Why did he go to Brazil?
His father was a Brazilian, and his mother never introduced the father to him. And he worked with Federico Fellini, the filmmaker. They used to do caricatures of the soldiers in Rome, and for a newspaper called Satirico. And then one day, Federico came to him and said, I guess your father is looking for you. And said, how come? There was a war correspondent from Brazil that wrote an article about how Rome, the eternal city, was destroyed by the war. And at the end, he said, and there is a father called, gave the name, that looks for his son. And then he wrote, said, well, that's my father. And he contacted the correspondent. And then they begin to talk to each other by letter. And the father invited him to go to Brazil. And the mother didn't know, but the last moment, you know, Italian mothers, she found out. And she wrote to the father, take care of my little boy. That was not so little anymore. But this is what happened. They fight it. You know, Italians, the first day they met, they broke. One day.
So,
Kaput.
I should show you a few images now from the phase of concretism and later then of also, as I mentioned it, intuitive geometry. I skip back to the concretism. And I mean, he was really one of the first who fought for concrete art in Brazil. I mean, one of his heroes, of course, were Theo van Doesburg and his Manifesto of Art Concrete. And I briefly say something about the concrete art, because Doesburg then said the work of art must be must have been completely conceived in the mind before its execution. The technique must be mechanical and strive for absolute clarity. And the reason why I'm telling you these quotes from 1930 now is to build up a little suspense, because in 1968, Cordeiro would announce that digital art has already begun in 1930 with the birth of concrete art. But we will come to that in a moment. So what I would like to ask you, he gained great visibility in 1952 when he published the Manifesto Ruptura. That was also the name of his group, and the manifesto was pretty provocative. Also, he fought for an art which is also an intellectual art. He said modern art is not ignorance. We are against ignorance. He asked for an art as intellectual activity. Following, of course, there are certain traditions in concrete art. But, I mean, modern art is not ignorance, we are against ignorance was also very provocative. And what I read was that he never shied away from a public fight. And could you tell a little bit about his public role in all these discussions about concrete art at that time?
Well, first of all, I want to let you know that Rupture is considered between the 100 more important manifestos of 20th century.
It was the first manifesto in Brazil
the whole
ever.
world. It's considered. I mean, it's one page, but it was like designed. You have a little in the booth here, and when he was talking about this ignorance, he was provoking the bourgeoisie, because one of the theories of that time is that you don't give education to people and then you can control them. And he was absolutely against this. So when he says modern art is not ignorance, he's really saying to those people, you have to give education to people. You cannot leave people without knowing even how to write and read. That's the situation. And I tell you, it's still the situation. In Brazil, for example, and Africa, and that's the way people are controlled.
Yeah. And he also was a big fan of Conrad Fiedler, who said everybody can have a good taste and just say, I like this, I don't like it. But if you approach an artwork and if you want to make a judgment, you have to have knowledge.
Well,
you have
this
to be
is
informed.
very serious, Margit. This is very, very serious. Till now, you come to a booth or a collector said, I like this. Okay, you like this. But do you know what this means? Do you know how to approach this in art history? Oh, I don't care, I just like it. If the person buys, it's enough. Look, it's not enough. So when he began to talk about this, it's come back a little one. Yes, it's because he said in the Ruptura Manifesto, the teachings of Leonardo da Vinci are enough. We have to have other bases. So as Leonardo was a scientist, he also looked for a scientific basis. The scientific basis he proposed was the visual gestalt principles, that I remember a book like this from Kafka, and they were like saying that, for example, how your eye function, how you see things. And nowadays, this field calls visual intelligence. That's an important part of neurology that studies how you get information here, how you store in your brain, and how you answer back. So this is exactly what he was doing. For example, in this first painting, what's more important, the white or the colors?
We have to rush a little bit because...
No, but I'm telling you, and this is what the basis he used to digital art.
Yes.
And he was saying about this, the scientific basis of the art.
I'm sorry to rush you. We could talk about this 1 hour. So we just, like he passed a different period. We will jump that,
Yeah, sure.
and go to the Pope Kratos, because this is really important. Because in 1964 there was a military coup, and this is a mixture of pop art and concrete art, a term which was, I think, coined by Augusto de Campos, a group of poets of Neugandres he was very close to. And could you say one brief word about that before we then jump to the digital?
Yes. For example, this word calls freedom, translating. And this wood, that's the base, is a wood took from the house of a worker, that he could not have a regular house, but the house was made of wood and very bad. That's where he ate. And that is Ford. Ford are the trucks. And the Ford is the symbol of United States at that time. And then there is that collage in paper. That is the president who founded Brasilia. That was the new capital of Brazil. And there is Buñuel. If you look well, you said Buñuel. That's road. So it's a thing that puts the people inside the world. And this is the shower of these poor people. And this calls freedom. So there was a strong political.
Yeah, we can't go into that because we have 9 minutes
but
left.
I tell you, this was a strong political, and he was censorship. A few works of him, they were just 1 hour in public and never should, because there was the dictatorship. Poor guy, he comes from Mussolini and has a little breath, and then comes the military. Not easy.
And just as a remark, Max Benze wrote a text about these pop creators, because here you see Max Benze, who has been later so important also for the digital art with his text, Generative Aesthetics, traveled to Brazil a lot, and he was also in contact and wrote the text about these concretos. But now unfortunately, if we want to come to the digital, we slightly have to skip the landscape architecture. That's a very interesting story. Over 176, I think, projects of public gardenings, even graveyards, playgrounds, which of course his idea of being an intellectual, an artist who works for society, this was where he could live it. But we're short of time, so we jump to this. How did he come to the computer in 1968?
He was researching the intelligibility of image, and after Pop Creator, he took letters as the images. So he would cut the letters, he would displace to see, for example, an A. If you cut, you have a triangle, and then you have. He was researching how long you can recognize a letter from the alphabet, and then he decided to use the random to compose. At this moment, he had to use the computer. So that's how he entered as a system of composing, because he came from this industrial art, and he was saying the second revolution is the cybernetics. So he was going into this. And then through the letters, he decided to go into the computer, and he did this kind of poetry that you know very well. Please describe it.
Yeah, it's a working with probabilities of the frequencies of letters in Portuguese languages, and some words have a higher probability of real existing and others a lower probability. But he worked on that with Giorgio Moscati, a physicist at University of Sao Paulo, and I can say the first trace I found was a letter which he wrote to the festival Tendencies Force in Zagreb, where he actually explained his stance on concrete art and digital art, and where he said the difference between the avant-garde of the first industrial revolution and the current one is only a difference in technology, not in methods. Both aim to translate work into numbers, and the digitization and binary codification of images are obvious paths for the use of computers. So again, he claimed in several texts that digital art really started already in the 1930s, and we have 5 minutes left. He then also was part of the New Tendencies movement, where he also established a lot of international contacts, which later on had an impact also on the distribution of digital art in Brazil. And so he co-organized the first computer art exhibition in Brazil, Computer Plotter Art, at the US Information and Cultural Affairs Service, with artists from the United States and images which he has created. And it's interesting when you read about what it was. Then the journalists write it was a normal evening opening with a lot of whiskey, but what was strange, you had synthesizer music and these works generated by artists. And of course, this was a major exhibition, Artionika, with more than 100 artists worldwide. So could you say a word about these images? Like, how did it work? How did he create them? And what kind of images did he choose? And how was that related to his also very political understanding of what it meant to be an artist?
Well, the origin were photos, and he chose photos from newspapers. And the key photos, like Vietnam War, here it was a manifestation against the dictatorship. And the process he used to digitalize was manual. It was a kind of, it's like the scanner, the same logical, but was done each number one by one. So a big work. And for example, when he used the image of Vietnam, he was visually researching how much can you destroy an image, how much can you make the image not recognizable anymore, like similar what the war does to the society. The society changes and you cannot recognize it anymore. So that was Vietnam. Here in the people, he was researching. It was a mass of individuals, but it was mass media. So he took the image full of 7 black and white informations, and he was going in series till the moment you have just black and white. Means you had just 2 information, and you could not recognize the individuals anymore. It was just yes or no. So everything he did with the images had a parallel in the meaning, had a kind of placement of an opinion in society. And that's what you're going to see in this film, how he was already very famous as artist. He could remain like that, but he was always provoking and provoking and provoking people. And nowadays he's on top on the traditional market, let's say market, but I mean world. And here he's still a pioneer. He's still someone that's proposing, that's opening questions. Even 52 years after his death. So when you are avant-garde, you are always avant-garde.
And he was very much influenced also by Antonio Gramsci, by the Marxist, who said that that culture was a decisive means of challenging the status quo and maybe changing existing power relations. So a lot of his writing about early computer art is also how telecommunications would totally change the art world, power relations, and also, for example, the relation between city and the countryside. I would end because we're so we still have 1 more minute. In one of his last lectures in 1973, he made an interesting remark. He said that the algorithm is the most democratic art form that exists. So his example was that Mondrian didn't create paintings. What he actually did is he created an algorithm which is now in all your brains. And in a way, that was the idea, that the artist creates an algorithm which then maybe could be used by everybody. But my question was like, how would he? What is technology to the rescue? Did he believe that technological progress, whatever this means, would solve society's problems, or what?
Yes.
What could art?
Because it would bring the participation of everybody. So he believed that everybody together could solve problems more than just bourgeoisie or chosen people. He really believed in this participation. And he believed in positive message of everybody. Nowadays, we have the media between us and the problems, what makes things sometimes very negative. So didn't happen exactly like he wanted, but it still is democratic now, very much.
So what would he be given the current world situation? What do you think would he do today?
He would ask people. He would annulate media opinion. Yeah. Yes, for sure.
So we are at the end. I hope not at the end of our time, but the end of the time on the stage. And thank you, Analivia, very much. And I may conclude with an invitation to Karlsruhe, because we have an exhibition on Waldemar Cordeiro on the occasion of his 100th birthday. And it's still on until July 6th. You're very welcome to see it.
I want to say this, it's just 1 hour and a half train. You can go in the morning, come to dinner back, and have a lot to talk in your dinner, because the exhibition is really great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please also visit the booth of Mayer Gallery. We have a few computer artworks, for example, this one that you can see at the fair. And now we're gonna show the documentary film. So thank you very much for staying. It was a very long day, and enjoy the rest.